ABC 10 News at 5 starts right now.
Members of the GOP are now starting to back the second impeachment of President Trump. The public comments the president is now making about that historic move. Plus, California's Democrats, they're calling on the effort to recall Governor Gavin Newsom a coup, how those behind the effort are responding, and the encouraging signs that the coronavirus curve is flattening across California.
ABC 10 News at 5 starts now.
And good evening. I'm Steve Atkinson, joined remotely by my co-anchor Lindsay Pena. We're going to be checking in with her shortly. But first tonight, tomorrow, the House will vote to impeach President Trump following the deadly riots at the U.S. Capitol. And at least 2 Republicans have confirmed they will join Democrats in that historic move. Also, a source close to the matter says Senate Majority Leader Mitch McConnell believes impeachment will make it easier to get rid of President Trump and rebuild the GOP party. Right now, the House is voting on a resolution urging the vice president to invoke the 25th Amendment to remove the president from office immediately. Analysts have said this vote would mostly be symbolic, with the vice president and cabinet not likely to invoke that amendment. As ABC's Elizabeth Schulze reports, the president is now speaking publicly about the growing impeachment effort.
In his first public appearance since the deadly attack on the Capitol last week, President Trump defiant and taking no responsibility for the insurrection. The House is expected to vote as soon as tomorrow to impeach the president for inciting violence against the government of the United States after he made these comments January 6th.
I'm going to walk down to the Capitol because you'll never take back our country with weakness.
But Trump telling reporters today,
People thought that what I said was totally appropriate.
Yet his actions that day have been widely criticized. House lawmakers are now debating a resolution calling on Vice President Mike Pence to strip Trump of his powers by invoking the 25th Amendment, which requires a majority of the cabinet.
I urge Vice President Pence to do the right thing.
Yet some Republicans who voted not to certify President-elect Joe Biden's victory, even after the siege of the Capitol by pro-Trump rioters, are still making baseless claims of voter fraud.
The rules were changed in unconstitutional fashion.
The FBI is now raising the alarm about more threats, saying armed protests are being planned at all 50 state capitals leading up to Inauguration Day, January 20th. This as field agents comb through videos, images, and some 45,000 tips to try to track down thousands of the Capitol rioters. The Justice Department securing its first grand jury indictments today against 2 suspects. The acting U.S. Attorney for D.C. announcing the department has identified 170 individuals who they will accuse in court of committing a crime at the Capitol, while 70 people have already been charged.
We're looking at significant felony cases tied to sedition and conspiracy. Just yesterday, our office organized a strike force of very senior national security prosecutors and public corruption prosecutors.
Senate Minority Leader Chuck Schumer said that anyone who was part of the mob that stormed the Capitol should be placed on a TSA no-fly list. Elizabeth Schulze, ABC News, Washington.
America's top military leaders are condemning last week's attack on the Capitol. Today, the Joint Chiefs of Staff put out a statement rejecting violence and extremism. They're reminding all military service members of their oath to support and defend the Constitution.
Today, some California Democrats unleashed a war of words against those behind the effort to recall Governor Gavin Newsom. The head of the state party claims that effort is being led by right-wing conspiracy theorists, among other things. ABC 10 News reporter Adam Rakusin spoke to those behind the recall effort who say, how dare they?
Those behind a petition to recall California Governor Gavin Newsom say they've collected more than 1 million signatures, claiming Californians are fed up with the direction of the state.
Welcome, everyone. And I want to
On Tuesday, the head of the California Democratic Party and several big city Democratic leaders responded to the recall effort, at points drawing a line from the riot at the nation's capital last week back to the recall effort, even using the word coup.
The same individuals and groups who were encouraged by California Republican leaders and attacked the People's House are also engaged in a recall effort against Governor Gavin Newsom right here in California.
San Diego Mayor Todd Gloria and County Supervisor Nathan Fletcher both on the virtual press conference.
Same Trump-inspired conspiracy theorists are now seeking to undermine our democracy in California. They are involved in recall elections against our governor, Gavin Newsom.
Those behind the current recall effort say, how dare they use that language?
Shame on them for using that tactic, and if this is the level they're going to resort to, then we're going to be more and more successful because the average Californian isn't going to put up with their garbage.
Randy Economy says the recall effort is about things like housing, homelessness, and the economy.
Californians are in dire consequences right now, in dire straits.
And let's be clear here, a recall is part of politics. Article 2 of the California Constitution, approved by California voters in 1911, allows people to recall and remove elected officials and justices of the state Supreme Court from office. Back in 2003, voters recalled then Governor Gray Davis and elected Arnold Schwarzenegger. Adam Rakusin, ABC 10 News.
Supervisor Nathan Fletcher also took shots at former San Diego Mayor Kevin Faulconer, who threw his support behind that recall effort. We did reach out to Faulconer, but have not heard back.
All right, now to the latest on the coronavirus here in San Diego County. More than 3,500 new cases were reported today, bringing our total to more than 198,000. And there were 41 new deaths, bringing that total to just under 1,900. It was also a busy day for the newly appointed Board of Supervisors as they tried to tackle new ways to respond to the coronavirus. Our ABC 10 News reporter Leah Pizzetti listened to today's meeting that focused on enforcement and their attempt to make sure resources are distributed evenly.
A plan that relies on regional numbers when giving out coronavirus money has passed.
That motion passes unanimously with all supervisors being present and voting aye.
Chair Nathan Fletcher and Supervisor Nora Vargas proposed this plan, saying elected officials at all levels are sending mixed messages with statements and actions in direct contradiction to the public health order. This plan placing a focus on addressing racial inequalities in the fight against coronavirus.
People in our county are hurting, especially in low income and communities of color, and we need to ensure that as the county receives future funding for COVID-19 mitigation.
The goal is to better distribute funds to areas where data shows people have been hit the hardest, which are mostly minority communities. Multiple callers into the county meeting expressed their support, one woman adding she hopes the South Bay is not forgotten.
Why is there no vaccine superstation in South Bay yet?
Joanne Fields also called in.
And I think it is a positive step in the right direction.
She asks why the Filipino, Asian Pacific Islander community are not included in this data-driven proposal, requesting the board add this group to the verbiage.
The only way to show we have a need is through data. But if we're not identified in the data to collect information for our communities, it's like we're invisible.
Saying this unanimous vote, in addition to the county's vote declaring racism a public health crisis, are good first moves from this new board.
We love to hear it, but action speaks louder than words. So we will see these actions move forward, hold them accountable.
Ready to see the follow through. Leah Pizzetti, ABC 10 News.
According to Fletcher's office, 335 cease and desist orders have been issued by the county's safe compliance team. Within a few weeks, 2/3 of violators came into compliance, but still 1/3 remains in violation. Businesses not in compliance with the public health orders will not be eligible to receive county relief funding.
Biggest signal to me that things are beginning to flatten and potentially improve is that around the 5th and 6th of January, we were seeing on average 3,500 new admissions for COVID across the state. Over the past couple of days, we've been in the 2,500, 2,600 range for new admissions. And that reduction of nearly 1,000 admissions is shared across the state.
That is the state's top medical officer showing some optimism. Dr. Mark Galley says there are some real signs that the curve is starting to flatten again. While hospitalizations are still going up, they're not going up as much as we've seen in the past weeks. He also says the holiday surge may be less than expected. However, Galley reminds us that death numbers spike last, so we are still in for some grim days ahead.
Mass vaccination sites are opening across the country. And as ABC's Rena Roy reports, the federal government has updated guidelines on who can get that shot and when.
A glimmer of hope at one of the largest retirement communities in the country. Residents older than 65 at the Villages in Central Florida getting their COVID-19 shots Tuesday.
I'm a retired nurse. I believe in science, and this is like better than Christmas. Thank God I'm a senior.
Federal officials recommending other states also vaccinate those 65 and older and anyone with a comorbidity, saying the government will now release all vaccine doses rather than holding second doses back.
Every vaccine dose that is sitting in a warehouse rather than going into an arm could mean one more life lost or one more hospital bed occupied.
This after ongoing hiccups in the vaccine rollouts. Long lines seen across the country as people wait to get their shots only to get turned away.
I've been on the computer since 8 o'clock last night and can't get an appointment.
Mass vaccination centers now popping up all over, including Dodger Stadium in Los Angeles and soon Citi Field in New York City, set to open by the end of the month as a 24/7 mega site. The national average of daily cases is at a record high with 246,000 new cases reported every day. That's about 170 Americans testing positive every minute. The COVID tracking project now says nearly 130,000 people are in the hospital with the coronavirus, 22,000 of them in California.
Now is the time to stay home as much as possible. Now is the time to avoid as much as possible contact with others that aren't in your household.
Federal officials are also offering to deploy teams to state facilities to help with distributing and administering vaccines faster. Rena Roy, ABC News, New York.
Soon, anyone traveling into the U.S. from another country will need to prove they took a negative COVID test before getting on the plane. The head of the CDC signed that order today. The test will need to be taken within 3 days of the departure flight. Airlines will be ordered to deny boarding to anyone without a negative test. That policy starts January 26th. The CDC also recommends getting tested again 3 to 5 days after arriving in the U.S.
A man who murdered homeless San Diegans in 2016 will spend the rest of his life behind bars. John David Guerrero will serve 4 consecutive life sentences in state prison. He pleaded guilty nearly a year ago to 15 felony charges, including murder, assault, and arson. He's responsible for murdering 3 homeless men and 1 elderly woman. Prosecutors say his weapons of choice were hammers and railroad spikes.
Plans are underway to completely change an iconic stretch of the border wall. Friendship Park, a place people could still go to actually touch loved ones on either side, may soon cease to exist. For nearly 50 years now, Friendship Park has been the only physical connection that remains for loved ones separated by the border.
Families have used the park for generations, families that are separated by immigration status, mothers that haven't seen their children in 10, sometimes 20 years, come from long distances.
Daniel Watman with the group Friends of Friendship Park says through the fence, people could actually touch each other. And over the years, the site has been the location of all sorts of activities aimed at creating better cross-border relations.
Yoga classes, poetry readings. We built a binational friendship garden of native plants, religious ceremonies. The border church has been there for years.
But within weeks, U.S. Customs and Border Protection is set to begin construction to replace the existing fence with a new 30-foot tall border wall.
It's going to be a scar on the park, and it's antithetical to what the park's all about.
A statement from CBP reads in part, the existing primary fencing no longer meets USBP's operational needs. As with all of CBP's border wall projects, CBP executes a robust outreach effort to solicit public input as part of the environmental planning process. Watman and others are now planning a virtual protest later this month and asking people to sign a petition. The hope is that plans might be put on hold once President-elect Biden takes office. Otherwise,
so it'll turn into a fortress with some access. That would be the best case scenario. And the worst case scenario is that they would close off the park completely.
Now, if plans continue on schedule, construction of the wall at Friendship Park is expected to be completed in late 2021. Steve?